What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be diving into my Week 5 top 35 running back rankings, and this is actually going to be the first week where we have players on bye. So 4 teams, the Falcons, Bears, Packers, and Steelers. So there are definitely going to be some fantasy-relevant running backs you guys might not be able to have in your lineup, might have to dig a little bit deeper into the bench, to actually field your lineup this week. If you guys enjoy the video, smash the like button, subscribe, but let's just dive right into it here. And starting off in tier 1, not going to spend a ton of time on these elite options. We have Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, James Cook, Jonathan Taylor. These guys are all going to be locks in your lineup. These are 4 of the top 5 running backs in points per game. The 5th one in here would be Bijan Robinson, who's on bye week. So these guys have been studs. You're going to start them regardless of matchup. Moving into tier 2, going to start off this tier with Amarion Hampton. Really rough week 1 and week 2. He has bounced back majorly with huge week 3s and week 4. In his last 2 games, he's put up 24.9 and 27.5 PPR points. He's getting involved as a pass catcher, 12 targets combined in those last 2 games. Obviously, the injuries to the offensive line, Joe Alt going down with an ankle injury, really sucks just like collectively for this offense, but he's still going to get solid usage on the ground. He's the clear-cut running back 1, and like I mentioned, getting involved as a pass catcher is going to be big for him, both for his floor weekly and his ceiling. Then I'm going to go with Devon Achane, just another solid week 4. The dude just gets it done in a variety of different ways. If he's struggling on the ground, not getting to the end zone, he can deliver a really high volume receiving day. If he's not catching passes like we saw in Monday Night Football, he can, deliver almost 100 yards on the ground, also get into the end zone. I also think the Tyreek Hill injury is probably just going to bump up his receiving usage. Like, McDaniel just wants to get the ball in his weapons' hands. With Hill out for the season, I think that could lead to a bump for Devon Achane. Still a really strong running back 1. And also, this Dolphins team is not good, but this offense is not bad. They're a fine unit. They are going to be good enough to support Devon Achane, and he's going to do a lot to support himself also. Then at running back 7, going to go with Bucky Irving. Coming off a big week 4, had 165 yards from scrimmage. Just a solid start to the season. He's a running back 1. Then I have Saquon Barkley. And honestly, this entire Eagles offense has kind of been underwhelming. They're winning games, they're pulling these close games out, but they're not passing the ball well. Saquon Barkley's averaging 3.1 yards per carry. This is a 4-game sample size. I still think Saquon's a running back 1 moving forward, but it's also not a great matchup here against the Broncos. He just hasn't been that truly elite high-end running back 1 that we saw last year. Now, there was always risk of this, right? Guys who handled the amount of touches that he did last year typically fall off in the following season. And so we could be seeing a little bit of that, but the usage is still going to be there. He's obviously still a lock in your lineup. I just don't think he's a set it and forget it tier 1 guy at this point. Then another guy who's kind of been struggling, I'd say to a higher degree, we have Derrick Henry going up against the Texans. This is 3 pretty rough games in a row for Derrick Henry. In his last 3, he has scored 2.3, 10.7 and 7.8 PPR points. And it's kind of funny because I've never been a huge Derrick Henry guy. I've been lower on him than consensus over the last couple of seasons. You obviously get the people in your comments being oh, he's superhuman. He's never going to fall off. He's never going to take a dip. And I've kind of just been willing to stay away from him as a fantasy pick. But I'm really not panicking here. Maybe it's because some people are thinking he's going to be running back 1 overall, and my bar was a little bit lower, but this does just kind of strike me as a down start. Now, obviously, the overall injuries to this Ravens team is unfortunate, especially on the defensive side, because Derrick Henry really does benefit from getting ahead early, getting those big leads, and then being a late game hammer. But I think Derrick Henry's going to be fine here. I'm not full-blown panicking. I'd still be willing to fire him up here as a running back 1. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Javonte Williams. I feel I just have to give him his respect here. He's the running back 7 in points per game. His usage is really strong. We had Miles Sanders kind of nipping at his heels in week 3, but then Sanders goes down with an ankle injury. Might not be super serious, but I don't expect him to gain in the backfield, at least, in the short term here in week 5. So Javonte Williams going to be a top 10 running back for me. Now pivoting into a very, very young tier 3 plus a Travis Etienne at the end of this tier, we are going to start it off with back-to-back rookies. The first one being Ashton Genty. And I know some people were panicking after the first few weeks. It was obviously a rough start for him. He goes out in week 4, absolutely monster game, 21 carries for 138 yards and a touchdown, 2 receptions for 17 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was great to see. This really has never been a skill issue. I know you have people like Ryan Clark talking about how he doesn't really, have that juice or whatever he was saying. The first few weeks were definitely not an Ashton Genty problem. It's just this offensive line had really struggled. The offense as a whole was certainly not firing on all cylinders, but this was a really strong bounce back. Now, I still think we kind of have to temper our expectations moving forward. This is a tougher matchup here against the Colts. He drew the Bears in week 4, which I think was a nice, get right matchup here. I still have him as a running back 1, but I do think he's more so in the tier with some of these younger guys compared to me being ready to vault him up with the Saquons, the Derrick Henrys, even Javonte Williams this season, just given his offensive situation. But great to see. Love Genty. Awesome week 4. Then I have Quinshawn Judkins, just back-to-back really solid games, 16.5 and 21.5 PPR points. In those last 2, he has totaled 39 carries, 6 targets. It really does seem like he's kind of just game script proof, where if they're in, these competitive games, they're not going to be leading a ton. He'll be the guy, even if they fall behind, they're still opting to go with him a lot. So he's a talented young player. The usage is there. It's not a great matchup here against the Vikings, but Kenneth Gainwell just had a day against them in Ireland. Quinshawn Judkins should be a stud fantasy running back rest of season and could end up being a running back 1 in points per game. That is certainly in the range of outcomes. Then I'm going to go with Trey Benson. I actually think Benson's kind of a decent buy low because in the first game with James Conner, he really didn't do a ton from a production perspective, but his usage was solid. He took 13 of the 18 running back opportunities. This is a really strong matchup here against the Titans. They're allowing the 4th most points per game to the running back position. This Titans team is miserable. This should be a leading game script here for Trey Benson. I like him as a fringe running back 1 this week. Then we have another rookie in this tier. It is Cam Scatabo going up against the Saints. He continued his really strong usage into week 4. Obviously, Tyrone Tracy in the lineup. He gets 27 opportunities. Wasn't the most efficient day. Didn't get a ton of work as a pass catcher, but he just dominated the usage. Also took 8 out of 8 goal line snaps, so he didn't get to the end zone, but the touchdown upside is certainly there. I think there's still some concerns about this offense overall, especially Malik Neighbors going down. This is not a great unit, but the volume's there. He did show, especially in week 3, he can get involved as a pass catcher. I like him here as a high-end running back too. And then the final guy in this tier is going to be Travis Etienne. It's not a great matchup here against the Chiefs, but Etienne has just been a really strong option this season. He's the running back 10 in points per game, averaging just under 100 rushing yards per game, 6.1 yards per carry. He's been efficient. The only issue has really been the lack of receiving. He is a running back who theoretically should be able to catch passes, get involved in that way. It hasn't really happened, but you can't really complain when he's rushing for 99 yards a game. Now shifting into tier 4, kind of an interesting tier here. These are our mid to back end RB2s. Going to start off with Breece Hall. I did consider bumping Breece up into the tier 3 area. He had really strong usage in week 4, 20 opportunities. On paper, this is a nice matchup. The Cowboys are allowing the 6th most points per game to the running back position. And then also you now have Braylon Allen banged up. It's just really tough to fully buy in on this Jets offense. I can't explain how frustrating it is to watch Isaiah Davis get in there on almost every third down or the majority of third downs, working in the 2-minute drills. Why on 3rd and 5 are you running a handoff to Isaiah Davis? First off, 3rd and 5 handoff, kind of a crazy play call, but it's got to be Breece Hall in there. Maybe they adjust to this. I do think the Braylon injury at least opens up the goal line work where, Braylon Allen has a costly fumble. They were driving, potentially scoring a touchdown on that first drive. He kind of screws that up. So maybe Breece can kind of take over that role. It's just tough because he is kind of losing out on 2 sides of the usage. But if Braylon's missing time, that's certainly a plus for Breece Hall. I'd consider bumping him up. Right now, I'm just going to have him leading tier 4. Then I'm going to go with Kenneth Walker. And I know for a lot of people out there, the Kenneth Walker experience has been unbelievably frustrating. I know a lot of people thought he was just going to, go into Thursday Night Football, be the dominant workhorse, and it just hasn't happened. He had a 60% opportunity share. It did look like he was on his way to having a big game. Then he gets the taunting penalty, and the Seahawks pretty much put him in the doghouse for that drive, which leads to Charbonnet getting the goal line touchdown. The big issue here is just that Charbonnet is the goal line guy at this point. He took all 3 goal line snaps. It led to the touchdown. And so Kenneth Walker is the guy who has the big play upside, but he also just has like the big negative plays, which seemingly is like really frustrating to the Seahawks. So as of right now, I have him as the mid-tier RB2. I still think he has the ability to pull away. I do think he's the better running back, but until we actually see him pull away with both of these guys healthy, I can't just like vault him up my rankings like I know a lot of people, thought I should have last week. Then I'm going to go with Kyren Williams. Not a great start to the season. He's the running back 20 in points per game. Week 4, we did see his opportunity share like really fall off all the way down to 57%. Blake Corum was very involved. I don't think that's going to be an every week thing. Also, like Kyren was just more efficient in his opportunities. So he's like a mid-tier RB2. I kind of feel like that's just where he's going to settle in rest of season. Like I know a lot of people thought he was going to have the same usage we've seen over the last few seasons, have like 80+% opportunity share. I was fading that this year. To be fair, I was also fading it last year, and I was wrong. But Blake Corum is firmly entrenched in this backfield. He's a factor, and that is going to be a hit to Kyren Williams. Then I'm going to go with Chuba Hubbard. It does seem like his usage, his like control on this backfield is kind of slipping, but it's also tough to fully know because it's been back-to-back really odd game scripts. In week 3, you had the Panthers just completely blowing out the Falcons like 30-0, so that game was out of hand. Then this week, you have the reverse where the Patriots just completely blow out the Panthers. So like in a closer, more competitive game script, are they going to go more to Chuba? We could get that this week against the Dolphins. Like I wouldn't feel great about Chuba. I think rest of season he's probably trending down. But in this specific matchup, I do think he's a solid RB2 option. Then I'm going to go with Alvin Kamara going up against the Giants. This has not been a great start for Alvin Kamara, especially for a player that really should have been like an early season hammer and then has really fallen off over the second half in the last few years. But he's averaging 11.9 points per game. The biggest issue has just been the lack of production through the air. He's been targeted 15 times, caught 13 of those for only 49 yards, has not scored a receiving touchdown. You also had Kendre Miller getting involved on the ground, 11 carries, 65 yards and a touchdown. If he's eating into the workload, that's also not ideal. But this could be a competitive matchup here against the Giants. I still think Kamara's like a fine RB2 at this point, but also probably trending downwards rest of season. Then I'm going to go with someone who I was really excited about, Woody Marks. Liked him as a sleeper coming into the year. I've talked about him in the waiver wire videos. He really just had a breakout week 4. 18 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown, 5 targets for 4 receptions, 49 yards and a touchdown, and he just out-touched Nick Chubb. Like it looks like he overtook him as the running back 1. And then on paper, this is a great matchup here against the Ravens. The Ravens have allowed the most points per game to the running back position. This defense is completely banged up. And I will say I wanted to rank Woody Marks higher. Like if I knew that usage would stick in this, matchup here against the Ravens, I'd probably consider him between like Breece and Kenneth Walker. Like I did want to go that high. The problem is that you just never know if this usage is going to like exactly stick with these rookies. Week 4, the Texans were leading. It was not a competitive game against the Titans, so they might have felt more comfortable going to Woody Marks. I do think in potentially a trailing game script, which based on his receiving should be good for him, but maybe a closer game script against the Ravens. Like, do they opt to go with Nick Chubb? These are just things I'm throwing out there. I do think like Woody Marks is potentially on a rocket ship rest of season. Just in like the short term in week 5, are we going to see an exact repeat of the week 4 usage? I do just have some question marks, which is why I have him at running back 21. If he goes out, looks like the clear running back 1 again, then, wheels up for Woody Marks rest of season, and a guy who like even if this team is kind of struggling, especially offensively, if they're in trailing game scripts, he is a really strong pass catcher and can certainly produce in those types of matchups. And then the final guy in this tier is going to be David Montgomery. I know some people were upset with how low I had him ranked last week. It was specifically based on the matchup against the Browns. Well, it's kind of flipped this week, right? He had an awful week 4, 1.2 PPR points, just like completely killed you in your lineup if you played him. But like I had mentioned, it was a really tough matchup against the Browns, who I think had allowed the fewest or second fewest points per game to running backs at that point. But now you have an amazing matchup. So he's coming off a really rough game. People are probably going to fade him this week, but he's going up against the Bengals, who have allowed the second most points per game to the running back position. I think David Montgomery is a really solid start this week. Now, the issue is he doesn't have a super high weekly floor because he's not guaranteed a massive workload, right? Like, he can get 9, 10, 11 carries, and if he doesn't catch any passes, he doesn't get into the end zone, he could deliver a very inefficient, 1.2 PPR points, which obviously sucks. I just think in this matchup against the Bengals, I think the Lions should cruise to a win. I think these running backs are going to get a lot of opportunities, both of them. And I think Dave Montgomery can have an efficient day on the ground. I mean, we just saw kind of like a poor man's version of this backfield with Dobbins and Harvey. Like, both of them had really productive games. Harvey, 20 plus PPR points. Dobbins didn't get into the end zone, still rushed for 100 yards, gave you over 10 PPR points. So I like Dave Montgomery to close out that tier. Then moving into tier 5, this is kind of like gross workhorse territory, and then also like the Broncos running backs mixed in. We'll start off with Jordan Mason going up against the Browns. So he has seen 16 carries in back-to-back games. The issue here is that he's just not giving you a lot as a pass catcher. I do believe he was targeted 3 times in week 4. The dude's name is actually slipping my mind, but they've got like this young running back who was super involved as a pass catcher, especially late in that game in the trailing game script. That's not ideal for Jordan Mason. Also, just a really tough matchup on paper where the Browns are allowing the second fewest points per game to the running back spot. I think he's fine as like a back-end fringe running back too, but certainly not the best spot here to fire up Jordan Mason. Then I'm going to go with Chase Brown, and we're kind of getting into like these workhorses within this tier, like Chase Brown. Like, the offense is just so bad. It's a better matchup against the Lions, but man, the Bengals have just looked so sorry. The vibes are so low with that team, that offense especially. But Chase Brown still commands a lot of work. He took 13 of the 15 running back opportunities. You're really just like praying he can get into the end zone, which is certainly not close to a lock with how this offense has looked. Then I'll just talk about both of these Broncos running backs together. I was someone who really liked RJ Harvey heading into the season. I actually really liked both of these dudes. Like, I think at cost, they were both really solid picks. And we'd seen J.K. Dobbins be the clear-cut running back 1 through 3 weeks. Given you his normal usage, solid rushing production. If he gets into the end zone, it's a solid game, not super involved as a pass catcher. And he had been productive, expected that to carry into this matchup against the Bengals. But we saw RJ Harvey really emerge in this backfield. This was very close to a 50-50 split, both from like a snap and route perspective, also just like total opportunities. So for J.K. Dobbins, that's not great because he had been the clear-cut running back 1. For RJ Harvey, like, this is wheels up, awesome news. Also because like he's getting these opportunities not because of J.K. Dobbins getting injured, being banged up. Like, J.K. Dobbins had been good. He had been productive. And the Broncos still opted to go, heavy with RJ Harvey in this game. So Harvey has 20.6 PPR points, 14 carries for 66 yards, 5 targets, 4 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. Now, if we're just taking the usage they had in this specific Week 4 Monday night game, I would view RJ Harvey as the way more valuable guy moving forward, just based on his receiving usage. And I do think he's the more valuable running back rest of season, like by a decent margin. But just specifically in Week 5, are we going to see an exact repeat of that usage? I think that is still a question mark. Like, you go from a super easy matchup against the Bengals, where they're in control of the game pretty much the entire time, to now being underdogs against the Eagles. I could see them trying to rely more on the veteran presence in J.K. Dobbins. So that is why I have Dobbins like a couple spots ahead. But I think both of these guys are in a similar range moving forward. And then in between those dudes, I have Tony Pollard. Man, like, the bet on him was the usage, and it's just like he's going to be so involved. Even if it's inefficient, limited touchdown upside, he'll still be playable. And like, he still is playable, but 10.4 points per game. This offense is just so unbelievably bad. He hasn't even been super involved as a pass catcher. Like, the vibes are just very low without Tony Pollard. And honestly, like, this Titans offense in general, I feel like Cam Ward's like post game presser really just sums it up there for that Titans team overall. Now moving into tier 6, going to start this tier off with Travion Henderson. Was really kind of hoping for a launch pad game after the just fumble issues from Ramondre and from Antonio Gibson. It just didn't really happen. This is still a three-headed committee. Travion Henderson had 9 opportunities. Ramondre had 10. Antonio Gibson had 6. Honestly, seeing Antonio Gibson on the football field is just infuriating. Like, as someone who is very in on Travion Henderson, I could deal with Ramondre. I expected Ramondre being a nuisance, especially early on in the season. But when I have to see Henderson and Ramondre, work this offense down the field, and then they get to the goal line, and we see Antonio Gibson take 4 of the 6 goal line snaps and vulture a touchdown, that is unbelievably frustrating. I also just think, like, Henderson should be able to continue to build on his workload, but it's just not happening at a super rapid rate at this point. So he's the running back 28. I think at any point you could see a bump, but it's tough to view him as like a really strong option or even close to that at this point in the season. After Henderson, going to go with Zach Charbonnet, and his role at this point does feel pretty fragile, where it's like, it seems like any given week, Kenneth Walker could just kind of pull away with this backfield, but he continues to be involved. 40% of the opportunities in week 4, took all 3 goal line snaps like I talked about with Walker, got into the end zone. He's a fine like mid-tier RB3. Then I have Ramondre Stevenson going up against the Bills. Like I talked about, led this team with opportunities, also led in snaps, led in routes. I think his role is kind of fragile. It's not a great matchup here against the Bills, but desperate running back 3, he's fine. Then I have the Chiefs running backs back-to-back, Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt. I do think this backfield is on the verge of being like a very gross 3-headed split, where you now have Brashard Smith getting more involved. But I do think you could have one more game where you can bank on like 11, 12 opportunities for each of these guys, where it's going to be a pretty solid split. I do think, though, their time of being fantasy relevant could be running out as Brashard Smith, starts to be a bigger player in this backfield. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Nick Chubb. Like I talked about with Woody Marks, this, is a very strong matchup on paper. I do think in, a matchup here against the Ravens, more competitive game, they might opt for like the veteran presence of Nick Chubb, but it's also possible he's just like the clear-cut running back 2 on a team that hasn't been able to run the ball all that effectively. And then the final tier, it's just 2 guys, but tier 7, I felt like these guys didn't belong in tier 6. It is Bill Krosky-Merritt and Chris Rodriguez. This is just a really, really gross split. I know, Bill Krosky-Merritt had a lot of hype coming into the season. I could certainly understand why, but it just hasn't really translated to solid usage. Like, you have Chris Rodriguez going from being a healthy scratch with Eckler healthy to Eckler going down, and then all of a sudden he's in just like a firm split with Bill Krosky-Merritt, kind of for similar opportunities. I don't think you can feel great playing either of these guys. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 35 running back rankings. If you guys enjoyed, stayed till the end, thank you. I appreciate it. Do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. But thank you all for stopping by. Stay tuned for the wide receivers coming out today also, and I will see you guys in the next one.